Hey everyone, welcome to Judging for the Wind. I'm Dave, and this is my daily ruling. Amy plays a hill giant, and Nick responds with a mana leak. Amy responds to that with a Dispel, and then Nick says, alright, I'll play Counterspell. Amy says, okay, Counterspell resolves, and moves the Dispel into her graveyard. Afterwards, she says, I'll pay 3 for the mana leak, and puts the hill giant onto the battlefield. Nick protests that he was actually intending to target the hill giant with the Counterspell, and so therefore hill giant should be countered. The players can't agree about what should happen, so they call for a judge. What do? Okay, so the first thing that I want to talk about is that as a judge, this is probably one of the hardest types of calls to give both players an answer that they're satisfied with. No matter what you say, one of them is going to be losing out pretty big time. And if you look back, neither player did something that was against the rules in this exchange. Indeed, the amount of communication and the amount of assumptions that each player made about their opponent's intentions were completely consistent with a representative game of Magic, even at a pretty high-level tournament setting. Even so, we still ended up in this weird spot where it's ambiguous about what Nick was doing when he played his Counterspell. And now that both players have had a lot of time to digest what's happened, and gotten significant information about what was in each other player's hand and what the other player was intending to do, that means backing up is a pretty difficult choice to make here, because it would generally disrupt the game state quite a lot, having to put him back in this game state with all that extra information. If only we had some sort of default to fall back on, some sort of policy that unambiguously stated what the target of the counterspell would be unless Nick said otherwise. And indeed, we have such a policy. If a player puts an object on the stack that could target another thing on the stack, it's assumed that the thing that they're targeting is the topmost object on the stack, that's it's legal for them to target. That means that in this specific case here, since Nick did not say otherwise, we're assuming that his counterspell was indeed targeting Amy's Dispel, because that's the topmost object on the stack that it was legal for counterspell to target. Nick's probably not going to be very happy to hear this, however, this is the official policy in the Magic the Gathering rules and policy documents. If Nick wanted to go with something else, the onus was on him in order to make sure that that was clear. Since he did not do anything of that sort, that means that we go back to the default assumption, and that's what we're going to base our ruling off of. Amy will get to pay 3 for the mana leak, and Nick will probably feel very sad. However, that's nothing compared to this next situation. Let's say that instead of a counterspell, Nick had played a Hydroblast. Just like Counterspell, it's possible for Hydroblast to legally target any spell. It'll just only do something if that spell happens to be red. So, if the situation was exactly the same, except with Nick playing a Hydroblast instead of a Counterspell, he would be in a really sad time, because the default assumption is that the Hydroblast would be targeting Amy's Dispel, which it can do, it just won't be able to counter it. Nick would essentially be throwing a counterspell away if he doesn't explicitly say that instead of targeting the default option, he is actually going to be targeting Amy's Hill Giant. It feels pretty bad to rule this way, but one reason that I make these videos is to raise awareness for these types of issues. I really don't like people finding out about this sort of stuff in the middle of a Magic tournament after they've made such a play. And there really isn't a great alternative to having a system like this. At least with the system that we have now, there's a clear default that we can point to, and the players, at least in principle, should know what that is and know what the outcome would be if there was a play involving these types of ambiguities. Otherwise, if there were no such default, well, the judges would have to rule on each of these situations in a case-by-case basis, which would lead to a lot of inconsistencies. At least this way, the players can in principle know what the outcome is going to be at any specific time, for any specific type of situation that would come up like this. There's one other thing that I wanted to talk about while I'm on this topic. The other situation where this rule tends to come up would be with situations involving the card Remand. Let's say Amy wanted to play a Hill Giant, and Nick played a counterspell against the Hill Giant. Amy might want to remand the Hill Giant so that she would be able to play it again on a future turn. However, when she does so, it's important that Amy should say specifically that she's targeting her own spell. Otherwise, the rule we talked about before is going to kick in, and the default assumption is that that remand is going to be targeting Nick's counterspell, which is probably not what she would want to do in this case. It's very difficult to write a policy that gives us a good, satisfactory answer 100% of the time. I'm not even sure if it would be possible to write such a policy down. So, I'm glad that we have something that we can fall back on, And in cases like this, where there's going to be a little bit of controversy, it's helpful to have something in black and white that you can show the players and refer back to. At least this way, they'll almost certainly never make those mistakes a second time. And that's all I have for you today. How did you do? Join me again tomorrow for another daily ruling, but until then, I hope you have a great day.